In the waning light of a bleak polar dusk, where the last vestiges of winter's chill clung to every frostbitten tree and the horizon blurred between shadow and ice, an aged polar bear moved with labored grace across a brittle expanse of drifting snow. This venerable creature, its fur matted by countless seasons of thaw and rebirth, its eyes clouded with the quiet resignation of one who has witnessed both triumphs and tragedies, seemed to carry within its weary gait a burden of memory. For decades it had roamed the stark landscape, a solitary guardian whose strength had once commanded awe. But now, ravaged by starvation and the relentless passage of time, its spirit dwindled in the face of dwindling prey and an unforgiving environment. Far away, yet inexorably linked by fate and recollection, an elderly indigenous man stirred from fitful slumber. His weathered face, etched with lines of sorrow and wisdom accumulated over a lifetime of hardship and miraculous survival, betrayed a deep inner turmoil. For years he had carried the memory of a curse, a dark legacy from an era when he had confronted the Wendigo and, against all odds, triumphed over that monstrous embodiment of insatiable greed and endless hunger. Now, however, his nights were tormented by a series of vivid nightmares. In these dreams, spectral images wavered before his eyes. He saw the noble white bear of old, resplendent and serene, juxtaposed against a gaunt, demonic figure, a Wendigo whose presence was heralded by a malignant red glow, its form twisted and insidious, stalking him relentlessly. In each vision, the nightmares grew more frequent, each one an urgent, silent prophecy that the ancient evil was stirring once more. Haunted by these visions and compelled by a deep-seated duty to confront the past, the elder resolved to seek out the aged polar bear whose image had so long been interwoven with his own memories of deliverance. He remembered the days when the bear, revered as a guardian spirit, a beneficent force who once battled the Wendigo alongside his ancestors, had been the very symbol of nature's benevolence and protection. Now, frail though it appeared, that same creature was said to be the embodiment of a sacred promise, a living link to a time when balance reigned between the forces of light and darkness. With a heart heavy yet determined, the old man set out along the frozen shoreline where the whispers of the past mingled with the howling wind. Following the faint tracks pressed into the ice by the bear's measured, labored steps, the journey was arduous, each step fraught with both physical hardship and the emotional weight of long-forgotten legends. Along the way, the elder recalled fragments of lore passed down through generations, the tale of how, in ages past, a fearless chieftain had invoked the spirit of the white bear to vanquish the cursed Wendigo from their lands. As he trudged through vast landscapes of ice and dark, birch-lined coves, his mind swirled with memories of that great battle. His own recollections were hazy yet powerful, flashes of a mighty white bear, its coat glistening in the light of the aurora, its roar echoing like a clarion call against the darkness, and, in sharp contrast, the ragged visage of the Wendigo, a creature both pitiful and abhorrent, whose hunger had once driven it to unholy acts. Slowly, as the biting wind whispered ancient secrets and the frozen terrain yielded only sparse signs of sustenance, the elder finally came upon a sheltered inlet where the aged polar bear rested. The creature lay curled upon a bed of snow and broken ice, its once powerful form diminished by the relentless hunger that had plagued this desolate land. Yet, even in its weakened state, there was an unmistakable aura of dignity and ancient grace, a quiet reminder of the times when it had been the chosen guardian. As the elder approached, a curious stillness enveloped the scene. The bear's deep-set eyes slowly lifted to meet his own, and in that silent exchange, something ineffable passed between them, a shared recognition, a bond forged through centuries of struggle and survival. In the delicate silence that followed, the indigenous man set about easing the creature's suffering. He gathered what little food he could procure, a few hardy fish snagged from a narrow, icy stream nearby, and, with gentle care, tended to the bear's wounds. In a small, makeshift shelter pitched under the skeletal arches of a snow-buried grove, he lit a modest fire and offered the bear warmth and sustenance. Their eyes met again, and in that moment the bear seemed to understand that here was a kindred spirit, someone who too had borne the weight of ancient memory and loss. A soft glow of mutual compassion passed between them, transcending the language of man and beast. But even as a fragile bond of healing began to form, an ominous presence lurked beyond the periphery of this tentative sanctuary. Unbeknownst to the pair, the cursed Wendigo, long thought subdued, had sensed the convergence of these sacred forces. Driven by a hunger born not only of physical need but of an ancient, unyielding vendetta, the spectral menace moved silently through the frozen landscape. It followed the subtle hints of life, the faint scent of warm skin, the gentle vibration of two souls united in their quest for healing, lurking in the dark crevices between jagged ice and shadowed pines. Waiting patiently for a moment of vulnerability, night fell with a chill that seemed to magnify the sense of foreboding. The sky, a tapestry of indigo and scattered, shimmering stars, offered little solace as the cold deepened and the wind began to carry eerie, dissonant sounds. The elder, restless from fitful sleep laden with nightmares, sat awake near the gentle glow of the dying embers in his fire. He recalled the horrifying visions with a deep, aching certainty. The phantom shape of a gaunt creature with eyes like burning coals, trailing behind the noble image of the white bear. His heart pounded with a mix of fear and resolve, for he knew that if the Wendigo were to return, it would strike at the vulnerable nexus of their shared destiny. And then, as if conjured by his silent dread, the Wendigo revealed itself in the bleak hours before dawn. From the inky blackness beyond the flickering light of the shelter, it emerged, a gaunt, sinister specter whose presence chilled the very marrow of one's bones. Its movements were fluid yet deliberately malevolent, a shadow coalescing into a form both unfamiliar and disturbing. As it stepped forward, its eyes burned with a primal fire, and a low, menacing growl reverberated through the frozen air, a sound that spoke of ancient curses and vengeful spirits awakened. The ensuing confrontation was a collision of elemental forces and old, bitter memories. The Wendigo lunged with supernatural speed toward the elder and the fragile bear, its claws outstretched in a terrible, hungry grasp. Though the polar bear was weakened by time and hunger, a spark of protective instinct flared within it. With a groan that resonated with the pain of countless winters, the aged guardian mustered its remaining strength, rising unsteadily to meet the monstrous threat. The elder, trembling but undeterred by the terror unfolding before him, raised his voice in a halting yet determined incantation, a sacred plea passed down through his people, invoking the blessings of ancient deities and ancestral spirits. In that moment, the clearing became the stage for a heart-wrenching, threefold battle, a desperate struggle in which the forces of malevolence and the tender power of reconciliation clashed with raw, uncompromising intensity. The Wendigo's assault was relentless, its spectral limbs lashed out with a ferocity born of centuries of unfulfilled rage. It sought to rend asunder the fragile link between the man and the bear, to extinguish the spark of compassion that had kindled a hope long thought lost. The old bear responded with ferocity that belied its frail appearance, every muscle straining in a last, defiant act of maternal guardianship over a kindred spirit it recognized in the elderly man's unwavering gaze. Together, they formed an unorthodox alliance, a silent, instinctual understanding that in the face of such darkness, the only recourse was to stand together against the encroaching night. The battle unfolded beneath a sky heavy with the looming promise of a new day, the first light of dawn struggling to pierce the oppressive gloom. The Wendigo's cruel assaults ebbed and flowed like a tide of malignant despair, its every advance met with desperate resistance. The elder's voice, though frail and trembling, rose in solemn repetition of ancient words, a litany of protection designed to bind the forces of darkness and confine them within the realm of banished memories. The polar bear, its breath coming in ragged, shuddering gusts, responded in kind with growls that merged with the cadence of the incantation, a primal symphony of defiance echoing across the barren ice. There were moments when it seemed the Wendigo might overpower them, when its sinister claws found purchase upon trembling flesh, and the raw pain of betrayal, the eternal betrayal of nature by its own dark mirror, seemed destined to swallow all hope. Yet, even as the spectral beast pressed its advantage, a powerful surge of shared resolve ignited between the elder and the bear. In a final, desperate maneuver that defied their weakened states, the bear mustered the very last vestiges of its once mighty strength and surged forward in a blinding burst of feral determination. With a thunderous bellow that resonated deep within the frozen earth, it lunged at the Wendigo, its teeth bared and its claws slashing with all the fury of a guardian awakened by the sacred memories of old. For a breathless instant, time itself seemed to halt, every heartbeat, every ragged exhalation suspended in a crucible of fate and legacy. The Wendigo staggered under the force of that primal charge, its monstrous form shuddering as if in the grip of a pain it had not known since the ancient days when it had first been cast out. Seizing the moment, the elder advanced with trembling hands raised in supplication, his voice rising in one final, incantatory crescendo. The words, "Old as the glaciers and potent as the winter's bite," seemed to vibrate the very air around them, setting in motion a chain of events as inevitable as they were heartbreaking. In the ultimate clash, a collision of hope and despair, the momentum shifted decisively. With one colossal, reverberating impact, the aged bear drove its powerful bulk into the Wendigo's torso, whether by the righteous force of a protective bond or by the sheer, unyielding will of nature itself. The demonic specter was hurled backward, tumbling toward a yawning chasm carved by the relentless passage of time and ice. Its final, anguished shriek echoed forlornly as it fell into the abyss, its malignant presence vanishing into the swirling mists of eternal winter. For a long, sorrowful moment after the terror had passed, silence reigned over the desolate clearing. The elder, his body trembling with grief and relief, sank to his knees beside the battered, exhausted form of the polar bear. The creature, its chest rising and falling in weak, pained breaths, looked up at him with eyes that held both resignation and a gentle, unspoken gratitude, a final farewell, a benediction of a life spent defending the sacred balance. Words were unnecessary. In that shared silence, an entire epic of memories and legends converged. The memory of a time when the bear was revered as a guardian spirit, the haunting recollections of the Wendigo's fury, and the enduring testament to the bond between man and the wild. Gently, the old man cradled the fading form of the bear, his heart heavy with the weight of loss but uplifted by the nobility of their struggle. With trembling fingers, he traced the faded patterns of scars and the once regal silver that had been so vivid in years past. As the first fragile light of a new day broke over the horizon, bathing the ice in tender hues of gold and blue, he knew that the time had come to bid farewell. In a final act of reverence, he carried the exhausted creature to a place known among his people as the Snow Bridge, a mystical threshold where the living pass their memories to the eternal realm. There, beneath a sky slowly awakening in a riot of gentle colors, he murmured a soft, sorrowful prayer, a promise that the bear's legacy would live on in every heart that remembered the true meaning of guardianship and the sacred duty to protect nature's fragile equilibrium. As the old man watched the bear's form vanish into the shifting veil of shimmering frost and light, a final, poignant crossing into the realm of eternal memory, a quiet resolve took root within him. The nightmares, the visions of monstrous hunger, and the scars of ancient curses would never be forgotten, for they were a part of a collective history writ large upon the land. Yet, in the profound silence of that transcendent moment, hope was rekindled. He vowed to pass on the lessons of that fateful night, to remind his people that even in the bleakest of times, the bonds between man and nature were unbreakable, and that every sacrifice, every tear and every heartbeat, contributed to the eternal balance of the world. Thus, as the day advanced and the firmament brightened with the promise of renewal, the legacy of the bear, and the vanquishing of the Wendigo's curse, became a cherished part of the ancient lore. In the gentle murmurs of the wind over the ice, in the soft glimmer of morning across the vast, silent expanse, and in the quiet prayers of an old man carrying a memory too sacred to ever truly fade away, the story lived on. It was a story of painful partings, of fierce battles waged in the heart of winter, and of an unyielding, transcendent love that bridged the realms of mortal sorrow and immortal nature. In that final, elegiac hour, the indigenous elder stood alone on a windswept ridge, his eyes turned toward the horizon where sea and sky merged in gentle unity. The bittersweet remnants of his memories, the noble bear who had once been his ally and the spectral terror of the Wendigo, melded into a single, enduring vision of nature's profound resilience and fragility. and with the quiet dignity of one who has borne witness to both the cruelty and the beauty of the natural world. He whispered a final benediction. In that humble, trembling vow, he promised that the memory of the guardian bear, and the lessons learned from the darkness that had nearly unmade them, would forever guide the hearts of his people, inspiring them to honor the land and to nurture the sacred balance that must never again be allowed to crumble. The frozen landscape, now bathed in the tender glow of a new beginning, bore silent testament to a legacy of loss and redemption, a legacy in which both man and beast had played their part in the eternal, unyielding dance of life and memory. And so, even as the ancient curse of the Wendigo receded into myth, replaced by the enduring strength of honor and nature's sacred promise, the spirit of the old bear lived on. It became one with the perpetual whisper of the wind, an echo carried on the ice, a shimmering reminder that in the realm of the eternal frost, memories, both bitter and beautiful, are never truly lost. Below is the next installment, the continuation of Memories of the Bear and Memories of the Wendigo, rendered in immersive American English continuous prose for voiceover adaptation. This segment carries the tale forward beyond the immediate aftermath, delving deeper into the lingering echoes of the ancient conflict, the quiet healing that begins in the heart of the land, and the enduring transformation of memory into a living legacy. In the wake of that fateful dawn, when the old man had bid farewell to the noble polar bear at the mystical snow bridge, the frozen landscape seemed to exhale in a slow, melancholy relief. Yet long after the bitter chill of loss had settled, the memory of that epic confrontation, the battle between tenderness and malevolence, continued to resonate in every gust of wind that swept across the barren ice and in every subtle ripple that shimmered on a frozen lake. In the days that followed, the indigenous elder returned to his village burdened not only by sorrow over the passing of his steadfast guardian but by the deep, unyielding truth that nature's sacred balance had been questioned once more. The nightmares that had tormented his nights began to recede, their ferocious images softened by a quiet acceptance born of understanding that pain and renewal were two sides of the same coin. In the village, gathered around smoldering hearths and beneath vast skies streaked with the occasional streak of aurora, community members, young and old, listened intently as the elder recounted the events of that harrowing night. His weathered voice, imbued with both a measured sorrow and an inspiring hope, wove together fragments of legend and hard-won reality. Each word he spoke was a tribute to the mystical bond between man and the wild, a reminder that even the most devastating losses carried within them the seeds of transformation. In hushed circles, the people shared their own recollections, whispered memories of a time when the great spirit bear had roamed freely, when its silver fur glistened like celestial light on the snowy plains, and when the Wendigo was but a distant terror, only to awaken now as a symbol of humanity's forgotten covenant with nature. As seasons turned and the painful memories slowly yielded to the gentle cadence of daily life, the landscape itself began to undergo a quiet metamorphosis. The relentless ice that had borne witness to the clash between ancient curses and tender guardianship began to solidify anew, forming delicate layers that glistened in the soft glow of the early sun. With each passing day, the scars of that bitter winter, marked by the struggle between the cursed and the sacred, were gradually healed as nature's enduring rhythms reasserted their sovereignty. The old man, now a living repository of hard-won wisdom, roamed the reformed glades and meandering trails of the frozen wild. In his solitary walks, he often paused before a clear, reflective patch of ice, his eyes searching for traces of the past in its crystalline depths, as if hoping to glimpse once more the noble spirit of the bear or the faint, lingering shadow of the Wendigo. In the quiet hours of long winter nights, when the air was crisp and the stars shone with an almost imperceptible brilliance, the village elders would gather in the great hall of their communal dwelling. Here, under beams darkened with age and etched with the symbols of their ancient lineage, the elder recited the lore once more. He spoke of the bear not as a creature lost to time, but as a living testament to the enduring cycle of life and death, a keeper of sacred memories whose sacrifice had sown the seeds of renewal. His words, measured and deliberate, reverberated through the gathered listeners, filling the room with a bittersweet mix of pride and mourning. The tale served both as a caution and as an inspiration, a call to honor the delicate balance of existence. to guard fiercely against the corrupting allure of unchecked greed and environmental neglect. And to remember that every sacrifice, every moment of compassion shared between human and beast, was an offering to the eternal spirit of the wild. Outside, as the land emerged from its deep, wintry slumber, small signs of life began to reappear. Tender green shoots pushed through hardened snow, and the slow, deliberate murmur of a thawing brook hinted at a future of quiet rebirth. The indigenous people, inspired by the elders' tales and the raw lessons of the past, set about their daily labors with renewed purpose. They tended to the fragile remnants of ancient groves and cared for the land with a deep sense of responsibility, a promise that even as human ambitions sometimes sow discord, the natural order could be mended through reverence, unity, and tireless stewardship. In his final solitary moments before the first light of a new day, the old man would often wander to the edge of the village, where the frozen expanse stretched out under a vast canvas of awakening sky. There, with every step echoing the unspoken bond between his heart and the wild, he would pause to silently converse with the vast, indifferent wilderness. His mind drifted to memories of the majestic bear, a guardian who had symbolized the purity of a harmonious past, and to the haunting specter of the Wendigo, a reminder of humanity's darker proclivities and the destructive hunger that so often lay buried beneath the surface of modern life. With a mixture of wistfulness and resolute hope, he understood that these memories, both tender and terrible, were meant not to imprison the heart, but to set it alight with the awareness that nature, with all its beauty and brutality, was an unending teacher. Thus, as the eternal dance between shadow and light continued on the frozen stage, the legacy of that fateful encounter grew ever more potent. It seeped into every conversation, every ritual, every quiet moment of reflection. The memory of the aged polar bear and the lingering threat of the Wendigo had become interwoven with the fabric of the people's collective identity, a living myth that urged each generation to look beyond immediate sorrow and embrace the timeless wisdom of nature. The old man, stooped yet dignified beneath the weight of years, carried this legacy in his every word and deed. For him, and for the descendants who would follow, the struggle of past winters was a sacred parable, a constant reminder that love, sacrifice, and the relentless will to protect the vulnerable were the true forces capable of mending even the deepest wounds inflicted by the passage of time. As life renewed its gentle rhythm and the cycle of seasons marched inexorably onward, the indigenous people's hearts embraced the bittersweet truth that every ending was but a prelude to new beginnings. In the lingering chill of the early morning, as the sun's rays slowly unfurled like ribbons across the crisp horizon, the memory of that long-ago battle, of the tender bond forged between man and the noble spirit of the bear, and of the bitter lesson taught by the cursed Wendigo, transcended mere legend. It became a living, breathing call to honor the earth, to cherish every connection between living beings, and to remember that even in the face of overwhelming darkness, compassion and unity could light the way toward a brighter, enduring future. Below is the final installment of Memories of the Bear and Memories of the Wendigo, rendered in immersive American English prose for a voiceover adaptation. This concluding chapter brings the old man's desperate quest, the dying majesty of the ancient polar bear, and the vengeful resurgence of the cursed Wendigo to their culminating moment, a final, heart-wrenching confrontation where love, sacrifice, and the eternal bond between man and nature are laid bare. In the pale, early hours of a frost-bound morning, when the horizon trembled between night's shadow and the hopeful glow of dawn, the aged indigenous man reached the far, wind-swept edge of a frozen expanse. The memories of his long years haunted him. He recalled the spectral visions of a glorious white bear, once a mighty guardian of his people, whose noble presence had helped banish the darkness of the Wendigo in days now lost to time. Now, his heart carried both the weight of those victorious legends and the sorrow of their inevitable decline. He had trekked silently across treacherous ice and barren tundra, each step echoing with the forgotten prayers of his ancestors, each breath a painful reminder of a land slowly succumbing to hardship and change. There, beneath a sky smeared with delicate ribbons of early light, he discovered the ancient polar bear lying in a sparse clearing, a once proud creature now gaunt and battered by seasons of hunger and unrelenting blizzards. Its fur, once as resplendent as fresh fallen snow, now hung in matted, tired clumps along a massive frame burdened by the passage of 20 long, brutal years. Yet, even in this weakened state, the bear's eyes glimmered with a deep-seated wisdom and an almost imperceptible fire, a silent echo of a time when its spirit had been invoked by a fearless chieftain to fend off an insidious curse. As he approached, the bear stirred ever so slightly, as if recognizing a familiar soul. In that quiet, charged moment, the old man felt the indelible bond between them, as though every line on their faces and every trembling step united them in a shared history of triumphs and tragedies. But the fragile peace was not to last. Unbeknownst to the pair, the cursed Wendigo, the dark remnant of an ancient malediction thought to have been vanquished long ago, had been silently tracking them. In the night's deep recesses, the creature had lurked like a malignant spirit, its gaunt form a hideous counterpoint to the benevolent memory of the spirit bear. Now, with the thawing ice and the cries of hunger echoing across the barren land, the Wendigo sensed its moment had come. Its presence was heralded by a sudden, bone-chilling gust of wind that swept through the clearing, carrying with it a sound like a dying lament, a low, resonant moan that sent shivers down even the most stoic heart. The bear's ears pricked, the old man's heart pounded with an awful foreknowledge. In that moment, everything seemed to slow down as the cursed apparition emerged from the shadows, a skeletal figure with eyes ablaze in a malevolent crimson light. Moving with an uncanny, predatory grace, the Wendigo's gaunt, twisted limbs glinted in the pale light as it advanced slowly, its hunger and vengeful malice palpable in every deliberate step. The ancient curse that had once consumed lives and ruined futures now returned to confront a living emblem of hope and ancestral power. Driven by a surge of protective instinct and the undeniable pull of fate, the bear rose with great difficulty, its feeble frame suddenly animated by an inner fortitude that belied its suffering. The indigenous elder, summoning the last vestiges of his strength, began a solemn incantation, a long-forgotten prayer passed down through countless generations. His voice, weathered yet resonant with the passion of his ancestors, wove into the crisp morning air a litany of ancient words meant to exorcise evil and to bind nature's dark forces. It was a prayer of both grief and defiance, a prayer that resonated with an unyielding conviction that the sacred balance could be reclaimed even in the face of overwhelming despair. Then, as if in answer, the cursed Wendigo roared, a sound so harrowing and guttural that it shattered the fragile calm. With a sudden and violent fury, the creature lunged toward them, its talons extended to rend and claim the life force of those it so despised. In the ensuing, heart-stopping instant, the clearing became a crucible for an elemental clash, a threefold battle among the fading strength of a noble beast, the enduring spirit of an ancient man, and the ferocious, relentless hunger of a resurrected curse. Time and space seemed to dissolve as the battle raged. The bear, summoning the memories of its former might, roared in a voice that trembled with both pain and a fierce, protective fury, a roar that echoed off the frozen peaks and stirred the very soul of the tundra. Its muscular form, though frail, lashed out with trembling determination, swatting at the spectral Wendigo with a mighty paw. The creature's ghastly form responded in kind, its twisted limbs whipping through the air with supernatural speed. Meanwhile, the old man, deeply aware that destiny hung precariously in the balance, chanted his ancient incantations with a resolve born of years steeped in both hope and terror. His voice mingled with the roars and howls, a solemn refrain that spoke of unity and the undying love between man and nature. The combat was fierce and unrelenting. The Wendigo's dark, insidious energy battered against the fragile alliance between the elder and the bear. In several moments of desperate intensity, the creature's claws brushed against the old man's weathered skin, drawing the bitter sting of cold blood. Yet with every injurious strike, the man's incantations grew louder, each word a beacon of resolve that forced the dark spirit to recoil. If only momentarily, the bear, too, fought valiantly despite its frailty, its eyes brightening with the fierce memory of battles long past whenever it thwarted a vicious lunge from the Wendigo. Their struggle was as much a clash of physical might as it was a spiritual contest, a contest in which every breath, every beat of a fragile heart, contributed to the relentless pursuit of balance in a world besieged by the forces of decay and despair. In one excruciating moment that seemed to last an eternity, the Wendigo circled behind the pair. Its skeletal hands reached for the old man's heart, a symbolic attack aimed at severing the sacred link between the guardian and his charge. But the ancient spirit of the tundra would not yield so easily. The bear, summoning a final surge of primal energy, lunged forward with a last, desperate attack. Its trembling jaws snapped closed upon the Wendigo's chest, and a ferocious display of raw instinct ensued. The old man, with the fervor of 1,000 ancestral voices coursing through him, continued his solemn recitation, each syllable forging an unseen barrier of light against the ever-encroaching darkness. The ensuing chaos was a blur of desperate struggles and the piercing sound of incantations colliding with unearthly howls. The Wendigo, battered by the raw, undying determination of its adversaries, began to falter. Its crimson eyes dimmed as if the very force of the guardian bear's protectiveness and the elder's ancient invocation were sapping its cruel vitality. Finally, in one cataclysmic moment, the combined might of heartfelt tradition and primordial duty proved overwhelming, with a sound that resounded like the toll of a long-forgotten bell. The Wendigo's baleful form shattered, its shadowy essence dissolving into a scattering of frozen mist and lingering sorrow. The stillness that followed was profound, a silence so deep and resonant that it seemed to mend the fractures in the frozen earth. The old man staggered, his body aching with the weight of his exertions and the pain of wounds inflicted by the spectral beast. The aged polar bear, its strength all but spent, sagged onto the snowy ground. Their eyes met in a silent communion, an exchange that transcended words, a mutual recognition of the sacrifice made and the fragile victory earned against insurmountable odds. Tears mingled with the frost on the elder's weathered cheeks as he knelt beside his guardian companion. In that poignant, heartbreaking moment, he cradled the bear gently, whispering soft prayers of thanks and farewell. The bond between them, formed through countless shared struggles and bathed in the light of ancient lore, was now enshrined in the gentle, cold embrace of the waking winter. With tender, trembling hands, he prepared a final ritual as his people had done for generations. He fashioned a small pyre adorned with offerings of fish and wild herbs. And in the sacred hush of that solitudinous clearing, he lit a ceremonial torch. The vibrant flame danced against the frozen tableau, a symbol of the eternal cycle of life, death, and rebirth. As the fire burned low and the ancient ritual neared its end, the elder carried his beloved bear, now too weak to continue its earthly journey, to the revered snow bridge, a mystical threshold said to lead the noble spirits to the eternal realm. With each step through the softly falling snow, the old man's heart both shattered and soared with the profound truth that even in the deepest sorrow, the sacred bond between man and nature endures beyond mortal confines. He paused one last time on a ridge overlooking a vast, shimmering expanse where sky met ice, and with words steeped in ancient wisdom, he bid a final farewell. His voice, gentle yet resolute, promised that the legacy of this guardian and the lessons of that fateful battle would live on in every whisper of the wind, every glint of sunlight upon the ice, and in the enduring spirit of his people. In the reflective glow of that icy dawn, as the elder watched the spirit of the bear vanish into the luminous horizon, he felt within him a spark of hope, a promise that nature, resilient and ever-renewing, would heal its wounds and preserve the delicate balance of life. The haunting presence of the Wendigo, though dispersed that day, would forever remain a cautionary specter in the collective memory, a reminder of the destructive power of unchecked greed and the importance of nurturing the sacred bond between humanity and the natural world. Thus, as the sun climbed slowly into a sky brushed with the soft hues of a new beginning, the elder returned to his people with a heart heavy yet uplifted by the legacy of sacrifice and love. The story of the dying polar bear and the vanquished curse of the Wendigo became an eternal parable, a living myth that would be passed down through generations. It was a testament to the undeniable truth that, in the endless dance of life and memory, the bonds of compassion and stewardship are the true forces that shape the destiny of the earth. And so, amidst the shimmering silence of the reawakened land, the final chapter of this ancient saga was written, not with the ink of despair but with the enduring light of hope. as the spirit of the guardian bear became one with the eternal winter, forever reminding all who remember that nature's most cherished legacy lies in the unwavering connections that bind us to one another, and to the wild, sacred heart of the world.